I'm really excited to introduce our two speakers today. So Becky Rupert McMahon is the CEO of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. I was asked to keep our bio intros brief, but I do want to touch on her extensive commitment to the community. Her board service includes First Mutual Holding Company and its subsidiary First Federal of Lakewood. She's in her 6th year of service on the Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital Board, and she's past chair for the Lake Ridge Academy Board of Directors. She's also a huge Cleveland Leadership Center supporter, Cleveland Bridge Builders alumna of the class of 2008 and Leadership Cleveland class of 2018.
Bestest class ever.
Both of them. Everyone always says that. And I'm also excited to introduce attorney Ian Friedman. He's founding partner of Friedman and Nemecek, L.L.C. He's also the CMBA 2019-2020 board president. He's also, I cannot neglect mentioning, one of the most sought after criminal defense lawyers in the country. He was previously president of the prestigious American Board of Criminal Lawyers, a fellowship of the top 200 criminal trial lawyers in the United States. He's a former president of the Cleveland Marshall College of Law Alumni Association. He's been a professor at the Cleveland Marshall College of Law for the past 15 years and was recognized in 2017 as its Alum of the Year. So I'm excited to turn this over to Becky and Ian. Thank you so much for being here and joining us today.
Thanks, Jody. Thank you. And
Good
morning, everyone, or I guess at this moment, good afternoon by a few minutes. It's an honor to be here with all of you and look forward to just having a great discussion where, as Jody said, we invite any questions that you have throughout. And Becky, if you want to start us off this morning, that'd be great.
Great. All right. Terrific. And let me start also. Yes, Jody, I am a huge Cleveland Leadership Center fan. And so let me say thank you to you, to Nick, and to Bob for organizing things for us today. We're delighted to have the opportunity for the conversation. So to get us started, I'm going to start sharing screen, if my technology skills don't fail me now, to bring up a slide deck here that will help. Whoops, let me get us back up here. All right, we'll get to the beginning. So first, a little bit of an introduction and a little bit of background in terms of who the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association is, before we dive deep into what it is that the CMBA is doing, both on its own and, more importantly, we hope in collaboration with many, many others. And as you can see, we've branded it our Racial Equity in the Law, our REAL efforts. So the CMBA, and Ian, you already heard, is our president of our Bar Association. Ian, just last Thursday was his official last day as our president, as we welcome the new president. And in a couple minutes, I've asked him to give just a few remarks about his year as president and what it has meant inside of our organization. For those who don't know, the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, we're a voluntary nonprofit organization that people can join when they want to interact with lawyers, judges, paralegals, other professionals, and frankly, business folks who work in and around the legal community. We have 147 years worth of operation, but we used to be a 2-bar town. For a number of years, the Cleveland Bar Association, which was founded in 1873, was the only bar. But in the early 1900s, relevant to our conversation today, there was a spin-off bar that was created, the Cuyahoga County Bar. And it was created by individuals who at the time felt that they were not being given the opportunities to lead and to be listened to inside the big city bar. And so they formed their own bar. And it took until 2008, so some 90 plus years, to really get to a point where the two organizations could say, all right, we've come so far, we can now collaborate instead of competing with each other, because really we are a unified legal community inside Cleveland. So since 2008, we've been a 1-bar town again in terms of the major metropolitan bar. And just to give you a sense of scale, we are pre-COVID, everything's in flux given COVID, of course. But pre-COVID, we're a $3 million organization with a professional staff of 20 plus some part-time employees. Our vision as an organization is to serve as the indispensable go-to organization in Northeast Ohio on matters of law and justice. We know that we are not alone in this pursuit, but we really see ourselves as the organization that can help convene and create opportunities for dialogue as well as professional development. We achieve that vision by promoting the rule of law, which again, critically important to today's conversation is the concept that all laws should be applied fairly and equally to individuals without regard to race, without regard to privilege, without regard to zip code. And we promote the rule of law by not only supporting our profession, but empowering our individual members and frankly celebrating and lifting up as role models those who do really good works throughout the community. And we're lucky that there are so many. And at our core, we have 4 essential values. The first is conscious inclusion. Inclusion embeds everything that we do. We promote professional excellence, innovative leadership, and community advancement. So when I came to the Bar Association 5.5 years ago as the chief executive, I had spent 20 plus years before that as a Bar Association member. I was one of those 5,000 strong lawyers. But I was thrilled as I came in as the CEO to get an opportunity to meet so many more members beyond just the inner circle that I had gotten to know on the lawyer side. We're judges, we're paralegals, we're legal administrators, we are law students, and we have more than a couple hundred business professionals who work in and around the legal industry. These are folks, for example, who work in insurance and are interested in being around lawyers as centers of influence. We work with a number of CPAs. We work with a number who are involved in business acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions, you name it. We also work with a number of professionals who are often testifying experts in a variety of different cases. So there's a lot of opportunity for engagement both within the legal community and the business community. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and let Ian jump in to talk about, sorry, Ian. Go, Ian, go.
It's all good. It's all good. So one of the things also, as Becky was saying, when we have non-lawyer members, we even have non-lawyer members on our board and in treasurer positions and so forth. So we really value kind of the different perspectives that folks bring from the different areas of the community. So what you have before you right now is our leadership structure. We really have kind of 2 components. We have the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association board. We also have our foundation. This is our board. And as Becky said, my term completed, although technically at the end of the month, last Thursday, I handed the baton over to Joe Gross. And Joe was a lawyer at Benish. So he has started right away. It's been a long time bar member, board member. He's served in all the different positions. Rose Feeney will be following him. She is general counsel at the Cleveland Metro Parks. And then following Rose is Adrian Thompson, who is one of the partners at Taft. And then you see Becky's photo there. Obviously, we've already talked about Becky being our CEO. So really what our structure is that when you have the president in play, it's a partnership between the president and the CEO. And this last year, it was interesting. I was asked to just kind of talk about for a brief moment as we get into what our initiative is and kind of how we got here. I remember a number of years ago when I was being interviewed by the nominating committee, and they said, you know, what is your agenda going to be? What are the projects that you're going to have? And I said at that time, I said, I don't know, which, as you can imagine, is an answer that may not be well received oftentimes when you're being interviewed and you say you don't have anything. But intentionally, I did not. And the reason was because I didn't know what the needs of the organization would be at the time that my term would come. Looking back, I am so glad that I did not come with an agenda because this year has presented so many issues, big issues that we've had to deal with, almost what it seemed from day one to be enough for a 10-year term. We started off our year with the question of what's the future of the Justice Center and the jails going to be. But more as it related to us, the lawyers were really not included in that discussion. So as you heard Becky say, over 5,000 lawyers make up the bar, yet they were not being asked what their opinions are and what our needs were. Even though we're there on a daily basis. So that was the first thing that we had to do. And we had to engage with those that were running that discussion, the project leaders and so forth. Eventually, we came into that discussion, and now we are stakeholders who are contributing to what the future of our local justice center and jail will be. We went from that into the tax issues because lawyers were supposed to be excluded from the tax exemptions for small businesses. We went from that into COVID, like all of us have, and overnight really had to switch what we were. We used to be where everyone walked through physical doors, but really overnight, Becky and her team were able to put us on a virtual platform. I used to say, and I still say often to other businesses when they say, how are we supposed to be doing now? I say success is survival. But I'm proud to say that with the Bar Association, our success really has been not that we've merely just survived, but that we have really taken a larger voice in the community and had greater reach through this virtual platform. So it's interesting with the creativity that can be used in our organization and other businesses, how there really is a benefit at this time to reevaluating ourselves and looking to what we can be. And then, of course, we all know what came after that, which began with George Floyd and the continued calls for equality within the eyes of the law. And that's where the Bar Association, people have been kind of coming to us for these discussions. But as Becky's going to discuss in a moment, we've been taking steps in this direction for so long. But now everyone saw it on TV. Everyone saw what happened. And so what it's allowed us to do is really kick into overdrive and really reach out in our efforts toward collaboration with so many other organizations. So there's been a tremendous amount going on. I'm pleased to say that we have met the challenges and I'm happy. Everyone asks, are you happy? Are you sad when your presidency ended? And I've now had the weekend to really decompress a little bit and answer that question. And I am just completely fulfilled. I'm satisfied that we've done everything that we were supposed to do. And now going to Joe Gross, he's going to be tremendous. And we're just going to continue on the road like we're supposed to. So I'm very pleased with where we are. Becky?
So as Ian mentioned, this discussion around equity and inclusion in both the legal system, our system of justice, and then the legal industry as a profession is something that is not new to the CMBA. We typically organize our efforts in 3 different areas, one of which is supporting the current generation of business and legal professionals. And to that, we do a significant amount of programming, and we've done surveys for demographic information about the state of inclusion in our profession. We've convened task forces that have come up with specific best practices around hiring and advancement, retention. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We also then spend quite a bit of time looking down the road to the next generation of professionals. We have a series of pipeline programs that run from high school through law school that are specifically targeting the development of future lawyers and professionals of color coming out of the Cleveland and East Cleveland City schools. We've got 15 years worth of demonstrated success in that arena, including a couple of years ago, we graduated our first law student who we met as a middle schooler, who is now a practicing attorney in Cleveland. And we've had 5 more follow on his footsteps, with 6 or 7 more in law school currently and another 20 plus that are yet to come. So we are developing our own pipeline here in Cleveland through our own school system. And then we also spend a significant amount of time and energy around reforming our system of justice. When the last 30 days began to unfold and the call for real change now surfaced, it was an easy conversation for us to jump into, and that we were already involved in the dialogue and we already had a framework. But we spent a ton of time listening to what people are telling us and where the energies and critical, impactful opportunities for real change are going forward. And to that end, what we've done is we announced last week to our membership that we are going to be concentrating our efforts in 4 specific areas. We've tagged this racial equity in the law. So you'll see that REAL is what we're going to be referencing over and over again, racial equity in the law. Our 4 areas of priority where we will be mobilizing not only our members, but also those with whom our members connect in hopefully what is a very broad-based dialogue across Cleveland. One area of emphasis will be on looking at legislation and regulation, which I'll talk about in a second. The second is continuing our efforts on criminal justice reform. The third is centered around promoting and growing white allyship. And finally, we're focusing our energies on a plan that we announced about 3.5 years ago that stalled, frankly, that we are bringing back. It's called the Cleveland Legal Inclusion 2020 Plan, and I'll explain a little more in a second. So to get started, the first area of focus where we have reached out to our membership to say, here's where you can get involved now, and here's how you can begin, if you haven't already been in the dialogue and in the center of action, to help move the ball forward. And that's around dismantling legislated and negotiated systemic racism. Essentially what this calls for is the effort within our bar association and others, which I'll talk about in a minute, to help do a deeper dive look at what are the laws that exist, what are the regulations that exist at the local level, at the statewide level, and yes, at the federal level, that are impacting and impeding people of color. So what are some examples of that? Well, an obvious one right in our own backyard is taking a look at the Cleveland Police Collective Bargaining Agreement. Those are 3-year agreements. We are right in the middle of the existence of the current contract. It's the perfect time to be doing a deep dive analysis and advocating for change, where change is appropriate before the next round of negotiations begin. We're also leveraging our members to think about and to move forward legislation declaring racism a public health crisis. And really, what does that mean? Not just declaring it a crisis, but then really creating a systemic, sustained campaign for improvement and investment of additional resources. You may have heard that we've been talking about a need for a centralized state-level board that can regulate and license police officers. And of course, qualified immunity is something that comes up again and again. How can police officers who violate citizens' constitutionally protected rights avail themselves of immunity to shield them from wrongdoing? These are just some of the examples of the laws and the regulations that our members and any of you who are interested could help us dive into in terms of analyzing and then proposing change for better.
Thanks, Becky.
Ian? Yeah.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that's important to know, I mean, there have been rallies before, there have been killings before, claims of police abuse and so forth. What we wanted to be very clear on was that this was not just going to be kind of a short-term effort where as we see so often, businesses coming out and issuing statements that, you know, they stand in solidarity and so forth. That's fine, but this right now is very different for so many organizations. But the Bar Association is very clear in our intention, and that is action, action, and action until there is real marked change. And so I think that's what has made this very different, at least in my experience, as I've seen it here. People have come to us as to say, what is the Bar Association doing? Judges, politicians, individuals from all different walks of life have said, what can we do with the Bar Association? Because they know how serious we are about this. And so one of the things is the CMBA is a watchdog. You know, we have been over the course of last weeks bringing in people to educate all of our viewers, to educate our lawyers, those of us who are going to be serving on these task forces, to bring in all of the different perspectives. And when we start to put in action, kind of serve as that watchdog, make sure that things are being implemented, make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing, but also looking at the different efforts that have already been put into place, you know, as far as the police commission, the disciplinary process with the police department, all of these things. We feel that it is our responsibility as lawyers, because we have that grasp of the law and the ability to take these matters into court, to serve as that. So not only drawing upon Becky's word, being a convener to bring everyone into the debate, but also implementing it and watching to make sure that everyone adheres to it. As we talked about with the Cleveland Police Monitoring Team, you know, making sure that the consent decree is being followed, but also amplifying the voices of those who are seeing it and may contend that the consent decree is not having the effect that it was intended to do. Listening to all of those folks and then really determining whether or not those issues need to be analyzed or brought up to a higher level. The Cuyahoga Jail and Justice Center operations. So one of the good things that we've had with the Bar Association is a very close working relationship with our courts. And one, for instance, so every Wednesday, our administrative judge, Brendan Sheehan in Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas, put together a task force that really started when COVID came, but it encompasses so much more. The issues of what's going on in the jail. We meet every Wednesday by Zoom with lots of other judges and stakeholders in the community and lawyers and so forth, because we're the ones who are interacting so often with the clients in there and people who are coming us to represent folks who are going through the jail system. And so we're making sure that this is a continued kind of watchdog effort or role, I should say, and then also making the needed changes and making sure that they are in fact made. The bail bond issue. Now this is something that's been going on for a long time, and frankly, I know Becky will agree with me when I say too long. The chief complaint is that the system of bail in Ohio discriminates against those who do not have the resources to post. And it really almost offers that little issue. So when people say, okay, so some people cannot get out of jail, well, what does that really mean? It means a lot of things. It means that if you're struggling at home just to pay your bills, make sure that you have food on the table for your family. If you can't get out of jail, you're going to lose your job. You're not going to be able to work with your attorneys near as effectively as you would someone who has resources and who can post out. So when people ask me about the justice system, being a criminal defense lawyer, and that's why this year was so good for me. It was like the stars were aligned this year to be serving in the role as president, because so many of these issues were criminal issues. They say, how does it work? And I say, well, which system? Because it really is two systems, those for the haves and those for the have-nots. And oftentimes, if you look at the demographics that are built into that kind of split financial assessment, you're also looking at, issues of race and so forth that are in there. It really is not fair if you are within the system of justice that serves the have-nots. And so we have, although this has been discussed statewide, it's been an issue that's been addressed at the court level here in Cuyahoga County. It's gone on far too long. And so this is something that we're really going to be pressing now so that we're not discussing it in years to come. And we can look back and say the reform worked as we expected it would. Becky, any thoughts on that?
No, I think you've covered it. And then, so again, this is a continued effort. And so beyond sort of those initial areas where we've been continued looking at statewide legislation, as I mentioned previously, criminal sentencing database, there is inconsistencies across the state. Even within the same court, from judge to judge, you will find great swings. So helping to support the lead for charge to create a statewide criminal sentencing database is something that is a natural extension for us to jump into. And our members—
Becky,
yep.
May I just jump in on that point?
Sure.
Also, I think one of the important things on the criminal sentencing database that people aren't aware of, if you're not in the courts every day, why this is so important, is because, yes, the system is supposed to be based upon transparency, and those who watch the news kind of get an inkling of what's going on in the courts. But one of the major issues is this. We have 34 judges in our common pleas bench. You could take the same set of facts. Well, let me ask, when people come to us and they say, well, what do you think is going to happen? So they come to us as a criminal defense lawyer. They say, what do you think is going to happen in my case? The most important day for a criminal defendant is the day of the arraignment, which is the day that they get their judge assigned to them. And we can pretty much tell how a case is going to go by the judge who is assigned. And that's not the way that it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be working to have consistency in the law. But without a database that shows, where these cases are landing, it's virtually impossible to do. And when the judges are imposing a sentence or determining what they're supposed to do in the case, one of the factors that our law, that our code has is uniformity. What are other similar offenders and similar offenses being sentenced to? We don't, as defense lawyers, really even have that information. So we're going off memory of other cases that we may have had or we'll put out on a listserv. Has anyone had this sort of case before? And that's absolutely absurd. this is an easy fix and something that we expect should not only should be, but will be put into play.
Great.
Becky.
And yeah, that's my subtle hint that we got to keep moving because I know we're short on time and we want to make sure we get questions. So
Right,
Ian, you
so
want to talk about the third prong of our campaign?
Absolutely. So the campaign to promote and grow white allyship, and what does that mean? There really are a lot of people who want to help, who just don't know how to help. And so, we have said over and over, and since the first rally downtown, it's our position that, there's no longer a sideline to stand on. And we really have been very clear that there's not a middle ground either, that you're either part of the solution or you remain part of the problem. And so those who want to help but don't know how to help, when we talk about white allyship, there are some who are nervous about, can I do this? Should I do that? When do I join in, and so forth. And so teaching people how to be an ally, how to be part of the solution is something that we are starting off with, which will help to bring folks in right away. And Becky, maybe you want to talk about kind of the real actions that we're taking to do that.
I sure will. Actually, I'll do it when we get to the end because we've got a slide that shows what the next steps are. So the fourth component of our plan for action is around the resurrection of a plan that I mentioned earlier. Actually was created about 3.5 years ago. The short name is the Cleveland Legal Inclusion 2020 Plan, or the plan inside our organization. The long story short is we did a first ever comprehensive diversity survey, a benchmarking survey throughout Greater Cleveland at the end of 2015, early 2016. We have known as a profession that we are one of the least inclusive, least diverse professions in our country. But as a community, we had never really taken the temperature to really get hard data around just how non-diverse we are. And so at the end of 2016, based upon a comprehensive survey that we launched to all of the Cleveland area legal employers, we built through 25 different volunteer organizations a plan of action around how to continue to diversify the legal profession as a whole. Essentially what we identified from the data that we collected was that there were 5 priority areas for effort under diversifying the actual profession of law in Cleveland. The top priority by far was recruitment. While we're doing a good job at the CMBA and some other partner organizations in generating excitement and interest and information in the next generation of professionals, we just don't have enough critical mass to really create a much more comprehensive plan for inclusion. And so recruitment outside of Cleveland was identified and continues to be identified as one of the single most important things that we can do to help diversify Cleveland's legal community. It doesn't mean that we're turning our back on our pipeline and our advancement of folks within our own community. To the contrary, we are doubling down. But we know that it's taken us 15 years to graduate 6 from law school from our own homegrown programs. We just need to move change faster. And so what this plan calls for is for a partnership among area legal employers who are interested in getting engaged to put some money on the table to help hire an individual whose responsibility will be to become a national recruiter for lawyers and professionals of color to say, Cleveland is your destination of choice. Not only because we have one of the most robust and welcoming legal communities anywhere and some of the most sophisticated law practices anywhere, but also because here is a community that is affirmatively building a plan to say, we want different voices. We want different perspectives. Come to Cleveland. And so the plan, it contemplates funding. The CMBA is a nonprofit. So we, like all good nonprofits, are chronically looking for how can we live within our means and find new resources when we have new priorities. And so this is an effort that will require collaboration both at the organizing stand as well as on the funding end, with an idea that we will, through collective action, be able to create a much broader funnel that will bring more people to Cleveland. But whether it's our first area of priority of action, which is looking at the systemic legislative racism that's built into our system, whether it's looking at the criminal justice system, whether it's looking at our profession, what we know that we must continue to do is to collaborate. The worst thing we sometimes do in Cleveland is put a flag in the ground and say, here's my universe and I'm going to handle it and nobody else is. This is a problem. This is an opportunity that challenges all of us. And so everything that we do is in collaboration with others, whether it's other bar associations, other professional organizations, our law schools, the American Bar Association, you name it, we're reaching out. For that reason, we reached out last week to our membership to say, here's what our plan for action looks like. Here are our 4 areas of priority. We're interested in those of you who are eager to get involved and to do something affirmative. We've had several hundred just in the last 5 days reach out to say that they want to get involved by going to this Racial Equity Now page on our website. We also issued a 21-day racial equity habit building challenge. There are a number of these different challenges out there. We adapted one that our friends at the Bar Association of San Francisco put together. There are simple readings, podcasts, and short videos that you can watch every day for 21 days to help on your own personal journey to better educate and better inform what's happening in this racial equity space and why has it never been more important for each of us to individually step forward. We've issued a challenge across our boardrooms and into our membership that everyone take this challenge. And we would invite any of you, whether you're a member or not, this is available to anyone who's interested in furthering their own personal journey. We're also in the process of collecting volunteers, again, through our regular website and also through a number of programs. Just the next program that's coming up on our docket will be held on Monday, July 13th. This is a Zoom webinar that we'll be doing, again, that is open to the public. You can get information about it on our website or on our Facebook page. But we're taking on this topic about the creation of a statewide criminal sentencing database and how this could play a role in helping to end mass incarceration and the inequitable treatment of people of color, particularly African-American men. Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor from the Ohio Supreme Court will be introducing that program. And then we have panelists from across the state, Judge Ray Hedden from our 8th District Court of Appeals, from Columbus or his Cleveland office, I'm not sure, Justice Michael Donnelly, and then Judge Jean Zamuda from Toledo area, who's on the 6th District Court of Appeals, and then Sarah Andrews, who is the director of the Ohio Criminal Sentencing Commission, will be leading this conversation. So in a nutshell, we've got a lot going on that are creating opportunities for action for individuals as well as organizations to play a meaningful role in helping drive racial equity and inclusion within our legal system.
That's where we are. So Jody, if there's any questions, we'd be more than happy to address them.
Yeah, well, first, thank you to both of you. That was incredible. And this is, I'll jumpstart us with a question, but it's also a reminder to please use the group chat to share any questions that you have. We'll try to get through a few. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So I know you talked about a couple of ways people can get involved, but what are some next steps for people, both lawyers and non-lawyers, to get involved and support CMBA's work?
Becky, why don't you take that one?
Sure. So the first would be is come figure out who we are. And our website has an awful lot of information. Ian, even though he's our immediate past president, he stays on the board for another year and will continue to be involved in leadership positions throughout. You're welcome to reach out to both Ian and to me. Either one of us, we're easily accessible. The other thing you can do is I would really encourage you to jump into that 21-day challenge. If you have never gone through a personal journey, a personal study of what it is that racism is, what the impact is, how broad reaching it is, and in many ways, how subtle it is, the role of unconscious bias, it's really illuminating. And for those of us, like Ian and I, we live in this world, so we're around it a lot. I'm going through it. I'm on day 5 of my journey through this, and I'm reading things that I've never read before that are creating opportunities for me to think differently and to bring sort of a different level of consciousness to my actions. So I would really encourage folks, those simple things, reach out to Ian or me, jump on our website and dive into this 21-day challenge. There really is something for everyone to learn.
Yeah, or also come into, we have these hot talks that we do monthly. We've had so many discussions. It's the one thing, not the one thing, but it's one of the things that we have done. And I would compliment Becky and her team. I mean, it's almost daily that we have discussions at the Bar Association, bringing people in from not just around the state, but outside of the state, the experts in different areas, just come and listen and see and see what touches you and where you want to involve yourself. So that she's right, and we put out those opportunities every day.
Ian, I see that we got a question from somebody saying, what are some of the impediments that exist to some of what we're trying to accomplish? You want to take that?
Sure. So as it relates to the issues of racial equality within the system, there are quite a few. We're talking about a long-term system. And so often, I've heard, well, this is the way it's always been. And that's the sort of resistance that doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what I, hear quite often. There is resistance right now. This, some would argue the most divisive, political climate that we've ever been in. And depending upon where you stand in the process, some are for change and some are not. We're talking about police reform. We had on, a few speakers in the last couple of weeks for our Tuesday Hot Talks that were calling for reform. And then in the immediately thereafter, you would see pushback from folks that don't feel that police reform is needed. Calls for reallocation of funds from police departments. We all hear defunding. Defunding has been politicized itself, that term. Defunding does not mean get rid of police. What it means is let's take some of that money that's gone to weaponize and militarize police and put it to greater social services and assisting those that are living in poverty. But there are some, that are saying, no, do not take any money. The police union, the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association stated, we agree to reform as long as you're not taking any money from us. So there's going to be this push and pull, and this is not going to be an easy fight, but it took 400 years to get here, and we're just committed now to moving forward until this changes. And, it will work. The change that's being suggested, the change that is needed will work. It's just those who have lived in the system for so long, it's hard to get those people to go into the fear of the unknown, and that's just human nature. So those are but some of the reasons that change is always hard.
So I would also add that I think there is one more practical sort of impediment, and actually there's two. One is funding. As a nonprofit organization that has been actively engaged in this arena, we are chronically strapped in terms of being able to come up with resources to do all that we would like to do. And COVID has been a significant disruptor for us, which is why not only is it important for us to have a game plan, but frankly, to bring in others, because we know we can't do it on our own. So we are counting on other organizations really working with us. We have a great history of partnering with 40 plus different organizations on an annual basis across a myriad of different diversity and inclusion related programs. So we're counting on our partners. The other piece that I would say that there's a potential impediment is because there are so many different people and different organizations who are thinking about, talking about, it is going to be easy for our community to fall down the rabbit hole of talk, talk, talk. And what really needs to happen for sustainable change is true action. And so that's where leadership comes into play. And I would just say, I think one of our biggest impediments is we have yet to see a leader in our community who has really stepped forward to bring together all of the organizations like ours. We are not the only one, but we are certainly one that is eager to play a supporting role in bring about systemic, permanent change. But we need real leadership. And so we're trying to do our part. I would say that I would love to see someone else who is in a more senior role, whether it's at the county level or the city level, who is really ready to start having real conversations. And I mean real, both in terms of our racial equity and the law, but also real in being transparent and accountable about what our community is doing and going to do about making permanent change.
And I'm glad Becky said that, because that would have been, you always get off a meeting, it finishes, and then you say, oh yeah, I wish I had said that. She's absolutely right. With the void of leadership in the city right now, that to me is a massive problem. But let me turn to what's positive here and why I think that this may be different. Because I have seen real change in the past in the criminal justice system. And what it took was a collaborative effort so that it wasn't just one group calling for change. It was many. And so we don't have time to get into all of the changes in the past, but I can tell you that each and every time that there was lasting, meaningful evolution in the criminal justice system and in equality of the courts, it's because we went forward and we said, you know, the lawyers and the business communities and the schools and everybody comes in so that it becomes highly unpopular to oppose it. That's where the direction we believe we're moving at this point.
Well, Ian, you actually jumped one step ahead because the question that came into me was, what gives you hope as you move forward in this work? And so you already answered that. But Becky, is there anything else you'd like to share on that of what gives you hope as you move forward in this work? And Ian too.
Yeah, I think there's hope every day that comes our way because we are seeing new and different voices. I mean, in the Bar Association world with 5,000 plus members, there are a number of folks who are sort of transactionally involved. They come for one program or they come for, but then we have what I call the bar junkies, the people that we see on a regular basis who are always saying yes to volunteer opportunities, some of whom are participating today. I have seen more affirmative outreach from our members and people outside of our membership in the last 30 days who haven't just said, do something. They've been saying, what can I do to be a part of this change? And the chorus call of voices for volunteers is louder than I've ever heard it before. And we're going to do our darndest to make sure that we're helping to organize those voices so they truly can get engaged and help move the ball forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, in addition to the calls, and Becky's right, we've been fielding calls, it seems like all day and night. But, you know, also when you're dealing with a volunteer organization, a lot of people always say, oh yeah, I want to get involved, but then they have to take care of their businesses. So how much time are they really going to be able to put in? This has been very different. Just the spirit of the people who have been making the calls, it is very different. They are willing to sacrifice, you know, time with their companies, perhaps income, perhaps even time at home, because they're saying this has to change right now. And that feels very different than some other proposals that have been brought forth in the past. So I think we both have a lot of hope. We both recognize it's a lot of work. The Bar Association's committed to doing that work. And, you know, we really thank you all for having us on there. And hopefully we can come back sometime in the future and say, look what's changed and look how much better we are today.
Oh, Becky and Ian, thank you so much. Your openness, your honesty, it's incredibly appreciated. It's exciting to hear, you know, all about what you're doing to drive change through collaboration, criminal justice reform. And it's exciting to hear how you're so uniquely positioned and qualified to take on such important work.